All right, so today we're going to look at the glazes. Before you glaze, make sure that you're glazing a piece of bisqueware. After your piece is dried, it will go into the kiln for the first time, and it will be low fire, and it will come out, and it will look like this, and it will sound like this. So it's sort of a light, creamy pink color. There are people, and I've had circumstances where people tried to grab pieces off the shelf This is greenware, not bisqueware. You can tell greenware. The dried clay is sort of gray colored, and when you tap it, it goes dunk, dunk, dunk. If you tap your piece and it goes dunk, 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 that means it hasn't been fired the first time. Do not try and glaze it. This is just a cautionary tale. All right, so let's say you come in here and you're ready to glaze. The first thing you have to do is wax the bottom. In the test tile, we talked about waxing the bottom. You put wax on the areas of the pot where you do not want the glaze to stick. Now, in theory, you can glaze your piece and wipe the glaze off, but it's easier to wipe the glaze off if you wax first. Before you start, make sure that you didn't scratch your name in the bottom. If at this point you don't have your name in the bottom, before you wax, take this pencil, the Amico underglazed pencil, and write your name on the bottom. It's very important that everything that goes through this studio is named. All right, you have two choices for waxing. You have, this is the hot wax, it's just an electric fry pan. It's turned on by pushing a button on the wall here. Every time you push the button, it gives you 15 minutes of time, which means that the wax is on a timer, and that means it will turn itself off, which is great because when you leave wax on, and this has happened sometimes, it just stinks up the place. Sometimes it burns down the building. It's a bad thing. You have two choices for waxing are, you can carefully, well, you have actually three choices. We have the cold wax, which can be used. It's on the shelf over here. It looks like that. It's green. You brush it on. It dries almost immediately. It will keep the glaze from sticking. The reason we're waxing is because we don't want glaze to stick to an area where the piece has to sit on the shelf. But we're going to wax this using the brush. The first one, we're going to brush it. Now you want to be careful. If you get wax in an area where you don't want it, i.e. an area that's going to require glaze, the only real choice at that point is to put the piece back through the bisque fire. If you try and scrape the wax off, all you're doing is scraping the wax off the surface. At this point, your piece is very porous, which means if you spill wax where you don't want it, that wax penetrates into the clay body, into your piece, and you would have to remove a considerable amount of material to remove all the wax, which means you would have to scrape and grind off some of the surface. So that is really not a good idea. So what I've done now is I have waxed the first 1/4 inch here, which is kind of a really good idea because when glaze melts, it kind of goes down and flows down the piece a little bit. Now I'm going to come and carefully wax the bottom. At this point, we don't have any color in the wax. Sometimes we get colored candles and we put them in here, and that helps us see where the wax is. Okay, so this is one way of waxing your piece. Okay? And now the bottom of the piece is waxed all the way across here. The foot is waxed, and the side is waxed up about 1/4 inch. So that one's ready to be glazed. The other way of waxing, if you have a relatively small piece and you're using the hot wax, you can carefully dip it in and bring it out. When you dip it in and you bring it out, the wax will stay hot for a considerable number of seconds. If you turn it over as soon as you get it out to see whether you've got coverage, it's almost guaranteed that hot wax will come off of the foot and drip down the side. So don't do that. But when you dip it in, like this, come in, bring it out. See that wax dripping off? You wait, you wait, you wait, you wait. You shake it, you shake it, you wait, you wait. You look, and you see. I would say usually it's about a count of 20 or 30 seconds. Once you're guaranteed that the wax is solid, then you can turn it over. And you can see, if you look carefully, you can see that the wax covered all of this area here and left one little area here that is unwaxed. So I'm going to come in here and carefully brush over that area. Okay. So now we have 2 bowls that are waxed. And I'm going to carefully, here's a plate that I pulled off my shelf that's already been waxed. If you look at it, it has the green wax on it, and this was all done some weeks ago, and it's all dry. So when you turn it over and you can see that it's waxed, of course, you don't have to wax it again. But now we have 3 places, 3 pieces that we're going to try and glaze. All right, when you glaze, the first thing you have to do is find the glaze that you want. We did a pan of the entire board here, of all the test tiles. The test tiles, they're all labeled on the back what the glaze combination is. But you don't need to read the label on the back. What you need to do is pay attention to the labels on the board. This row of glazes right here is labeled gray blue. This is gray blue. So what that means is that all the test tiles in this row were all dipped in gray blue glaze first. And then they were all glazed on the other, in the other half of, in the bottom half of each tile was glazed in one of the other class glazes. And those are all labeled on the vertical column. So for example, I look at this tile here and I can see that gray blue is the first glaze, and that's the glaze that I see on top. If I look up the column to the top and I look at the label, it says Boston Cream. So that means that gray blue, this tile has gray blue on top, and it has Boston Cream over gray blue on the bottom. If I go down the line here to the gray blue column, you can see this is gray blue on the bottom and a second dip of gray blue on the top. So this is the system by which all of our class glazes are organized, so that you can pick any tile on the board and figure out what it is that we're going to do. So we've got Let's look at the Daria's Double Red. We're going to use that glaze today. So here's the Daria's Double Red row. And let's come down to Boston Cream. We're going to use that too. So here is Daria's Double Red and Boston Cream. And we're going to use that combination today. Well, all of these glazes have funny names. The names come from however they were put together. Many of the glazes that we use most of the glazes that we use come from other studios. Some of the glazes that we have in here were created in the studio. They all have individual names. So here is Electric Blue, which we have in front of us. And there's Electric Blue. Oh, and that's Iron Red. We don't have it. We'll get Iron Red. All right, so here's Electric Blue and Iron Red right here. So remember that when you first come in here to glaze, first thing you should do is come to this board and find some tiles that appeal to you, and then use the labeling on the board to figure out what that combination is. Remember, the top half of the tile is a single glaze. The bottom half of the tile is two glazes, one on top of the other. If you want to see what that single glaze looks like all by itself, all you have to do is come down the row to where it's by itself. I got it mixed up, okay. Now let's look at the glazes themselves. Okay, as I said when we were in the spray booth, the glaze color in the bucket has very little relationship to the glaze color of the final piece. So here is the floating blue. It's kind of a blue with black highlights. This is what it looks like in the bucket. All of these buckets have stirrers in them. You should always stir the bucket at least 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You should always stir it at least 10 times before you use any of the glaze. These glazes they're like paint or anything else. They settle out. And 1 or 2 wipes with the brush will not bring them up. You have to really work at it and get it all up into suspension. If you want to know if it's got enough glaze, if the glaze is thick enough, you just stick your finger into it, go like this. If you have full coverage on your finger, then you'll get full coverage on your piece. So let's deal with combination here. So here we are. This is Electric Blue, and it's sort of brown. No, this is Floating Blue. It's sort of brown. This is Electric Blue. It's another blue, but it's kind of gray. Here is Boston Cream, which is sort of a yellow with brown highlights. And it's the color of what? No color at all. And the last is the Daria's Double Red. And Daria's Double Red is a surprise because it has a little bit of relationship to red. It's sort of pink. And the difference between this glaze and these other 3 glazes is that Daria's Double Red is colored with stains. And in one of your take-homes, it's going to ask you what a stain is. The answer to that question is a stain is a combination of glaze colorants that have been already fired and ground back down into powder. Because they've been fired, they show you what the color is that they're supposed to be. So that's the difference between stains and oxides. All these other glazes are colored with oxides. So let's get into glazing. You have a couple of choices here for glazing. You can dip, you can pour, you can brush, or you can spray. First thing we're going to do is dip. If you dip your glaze, if you want to dip the whole glaze, then you should use these tongs. You want to dip the whole piece in the glaze. The first thing you want to do is make sure that the glaze is the right consistency. Okay, so this is floating glue. Okay. That looks really good, and it's been stirred up. So before I dip, I'm going to take this brush and get it out of the way, because this is going to be, this is probably the largest piece that you can dip into a bucket. You can see the size of the piece, and you can see the size of the bucket. So it's going to be a little bit of a problem to get this in there and get it completely submerged and then get it back out. We're going to give it a try. These are the tongs. You hold them like this. When this piece comes out, there will be, I'm going to take this off. When this piece comes out, there will be 1, 2, 3, 4 little marks on here, which you'll fix by just taking a little dab of glaze once it's dry, and fill those tabs with little dabs from your fingers. So I'm just trying to get in here, go down like this. Our glazes only require less than 2 seconds submersion. So we put that in there, completely covered. We hold it, allow the drips to come off. If you look closely, you can see that it's already starting to dry. When you glaze and you do your first dip, the glaze will dry very quickly. If you do a second glaze or a third glaze, each one of those glazes will dry more slowly, because glazes dry because the piece absorbs the water from the glaze. So you can look here and here, and the piece is dry, and carefully release it like that. You can see that we have 2 little dots here and 2 little dots there. All we're going to do is come in here, and they dry very quickly. If you make a mistake glazing, you dribble glaze where you don't want it, or you miss a spot, or whatever you do, the best advice is to wait until the piece is completely dry before you dry and do any corrections. I don't know if you can see clearly, but the piece is completely dry except for this little rim area here. It's still slightly wet, so be very careful. All right, so what we have here now is we have a complete coat of Daria's floating glue on this bowl. And let's take a look at what, let's go down. Daria's floating glue is right here. We'll go down and we'll look at see if Boston cream has any effect. Oh. Not much. All right, so if you look down the road here, the Darius double blue, floating blue, Darius floating blue is such a strong dark glaze that very few of the other glazes have any real effect over it. Although seafoam looks interesting to me. So I'm gonna go find the seafoam, and we're gonna put a second coat of seafoam over part of this piece. But for the time being, we're gonna let this piece dry because you can see that there's still a little bit of wet glaze right here on the rim. So that's dipping the whole piece. Now we'll try dipping half and half. Okay. We'll try Darius double red over Boston cream. And that looks like a really interesting combination. Here's the Boston cream line right here. And this is Boston cream all by itself. The Darius double red over Boston cream does an interesting trick where the glaze is thick, it's red, and where it's thin, it's just a light cream. And remember, glazes really are not like paints at all. So what we're gonna have here, we're gonna have a piece that is Boston cream over a third, Darius double red over Boston cream over the middle third, and then Darius double red all by itself on the outside. So what we have to do is stir up the Boston cream. Get that stirred out of the way. I'm going to dip this to about this line here. So you've got to be patient, 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 patient. See that glaze just sitting there, wants to roll back and forth. That drip on the edge, if at this point I turn this piece right side up, what would happen is that drip would roll down the outside here and make a separate marking, which I don't want. Okay. All right. That's good. All right, so here we are. That is Boston cream all the way from here to here. You can tell here that the surface here is still kind of wet. Hope that dries quickly. And I'm going to put this aside. The thing about glazing and the thing about everything in ceramics is you have to be patient. You just have to be patient. When things are ready for the next stage, that's when you do the next stage. If you try and push it, then you're going to end up having to go back and redo it all over again, which actually takes more time. So the plan here is Boston cream, then we're going to come back with Darius double red to about here, and then we're going to have a piece with 3 colors on it. We're going to have Boston cream on one corner here. We're going to have this mixture of Boston cream and Darius double red in the center. And then we're going to have Darius double red completely over here by itself. Okay? Okay. All right, so now we've done a couple of techniques here. I'm going to do a final technique called pouring. Electric blue. All right, so let's look at the electric blue line. This is interesting because this is electric blue and this is iron red. This is a great combination. Right here you can see the electric blue, a deep blue on top, and then iron red is sort of this speckly brown and beige crystalline thing on top. So we're going to do this whole plate in electric blue first. And then we're going to then we're going to pour iron red over part of the inside. So let's do the outside of this plate with pouring, and then we'll do the inside with the brush. Okay. So this is one way of getting glaze on the outside of your piece. Just pour it. Now remember, this works because I wax the whole inside. And I wax the whole foot first. Okay. So I made a little mistake there. I'm going to get that off right now. Okay. All right, so we're going to brush glaze on the inside. We're going to try and get this inside glaze as even as possible. And the best way to do that is to have a little jar. Don't try and work out of the bucket. That always makes a mess. So what I have here is a jar of the electric blue. And what I want to do is put as even a coat of electric blue over this whole surface. When you brush glazes on, you have to brush at least 2 coats to get an adequate layer. Glaze is not like paint, meaning once you get enough on there so that it looks like you've covered the surface, it does not mean that you're actually getting the glaze color. In order for the glaze color to be even and full, the glaze has to achieve a certain thickness, and one brush of glaze will not give you that. So we go like this. And be systematic. I'm brushing all of this glaze on. in one layer. The thing about glaze is that once it gets to a certain thickness, it's all the same color. So what you have to do with your brushing is achieve that certain thickness. Now, you don't want to get too much, but when you're brushing glaze on, it's very difficult, very unlikely that you're going to get too much glaze. You just want to get enough so that the electric blue that we're looking for comes through. Now, there's a very good chance we're going to be able to add on to this little video later and show you these pieces after they're fired. All right, so here we are. What I've done here is I've used a wide brush and I've brushed the glaze on all in one direction, left to right. Now I'm going to turn this piece 90 degrees and I'm going to brush across my previous brush marks, 90 degrees from the original. This generally gives you a thick enough coat so that it will all be electric blue. Now you could also do the inside of this plate using the spray booth. But you would want to, if you use the spray booth to cover the inside of this plate, you want to make sure that you have brushed at least 2 layers on the outside, or you had poured glaze on the outside before you sprayed. The spray booth is really no good for spray booth cannot get underneath here unless you turn the whole thing over. You can see the more glaze we put on here, the longer it takes for the glaze to dry. You see I just finished brushing this area here. It's really not quite dry. We're going to wait for it to dry. I'm going to probably put a 3rd coat on here in just a minute. But while we're waiting for this to dry, let's go back to one of our previous projects and finish that. This is how glazing works. You have to do multiple projects at the same time because it takes a while for projects to dry. All right, so here we are with the Boston cream, and we were going to dip it in the Darius double red on this half. So this side is just dry enough to hold on to. What I'm going to do is dip it in the Darius double red to this layer right here. So what we're going to have is the Boston cream on this side, the kind of creamy red in the center, and then we're going to have the dark red on the far side. Because this is still a little bit wet, I'm going to hold it here and here. Patience. Patience. All right, so even though I have waxed here, you can see that the glaze does stick to the wax slightly. So what you do after the pieces are completely dry and you can handle them is you pick them up. You take a sponge and you wipe the extra glaze off the bottom. If the pieces aren't clean on the bottom, they will not be put in the kiln. And they will end up back on the shelf in the glaze room with a note. You especially want to make sure that there's no glaze anywhere near the front. Okay. So we'll take a look at this when it comes out of the kiln. All right, getting back to another piece that we have here. This is the piece this is the electric blue. This piece I held upside down and I poured the electric blue along the outside. And then with my wide brush, I brushed in 2 layers of electric blue, one in one direction and one in the other direction. Now I'm going to go and get the iron red, which is right here. This is the color I want. I'm going to go and get the iron red, and I'm going to just pour a mark across part of this piece, and then I'm going to call it a day for this piece. I'll find the iron red. All right, so I found the iron red. All I need is a cup. But before I do that, we're going to do one more thing to illustrate some of the possibilities in the studio. So here's the iron red. Here's the cup I'm going to use. This is the electric blue, so I'm not going to use that right away. This is the cup I'm going to use to pour the iron red. Before I do that, I'm going to pour iron red over maybe a third to a half of this piece, so that I'm going to end up with electric blue out here. I'm going to end up with this sparkly brown with little sparkles in it across this part. We're going to set it up so that there are a few spots, areas in the poured over area that show the electric blue coming through. And the way I'm going to do that is with wax resist. So here's the cold wax. I'm going to put some dots here. because these are small little dots, not big. So they'll dry. Have to wait until they're dry, but they will dry very quickly. Now the cold wax is probably better for this type of wax resist. Because it's easier to control. That's the upside. The downside of the cold wax, well, with any wax, is that it tends to clog up your brush, so that if you use the cold wax, as soon as you're done using the cold wax, you want to get your brush out of the cold wax. And get it into water with soap immediately. If you get it into water with soap, and you can use the hand soap that we have right here in the glaze room. If you get it into water with soap immediately, you will maintain the natural quality of the brush. If you do not clean them, it's just like with any paint, if you do not clean the brush properly, it will lose its subtleness, it will lose its brush-like qualities, and it will become more like a stick. So I've gone over to the sink. I've gotten a lot of soap here, and I'm just really scrubbing that brush down. Now I'm going to rinse it, and it'll be just as good as it was. And you want to do that cleaning as soon as you can after using it. The cold wax is very much like a latex paint. In fact, it's probably latex based. And what that means is that it starts to, as soon as you stop using it, it starts to set up. And if it sets up at all within your brush, then it's just harder to clean. You get more of it out. Okay, so here we are. We have the electric blue. On the inside and on the outside. I put in these latex dots here. I'm going to do a pour right across here so that roughly this third of the plate is, my intention is to have this third of the plate with the iron red, and then the rest of the 2/3 still with the electric blue, and then have the iron red have little electric blue dots in it. We'll see how it works out. See, the reason I'm shaking it is to break the surface tension of the glass of the glaze, so that it peels off of the wax. All right. So what happened here, is that for the most part it worked. If you look closely, you can't probably see this. I'll bring this up, see if it's possible to bring this closer. If you look closely, this is where the wax worked. If you look at these little, you can see little wet spots here. The wet spots are where the wax prevented this glaze from drying, and it's just sort of sitting on the top there. If I take a wet brush, if I take a wet brush with any luck, that's not going to work. There we go. Sometimes if you take a wet brush to those areas, you can thin that glaze out to the point where it peels off. But as in many, many aspects of ceramics, there we go. You have to take what the process gives you. If you try and push it past the point where it wants to be pushed, you can end up with all kinds of problems. So this is, so we'll take a look at this when it comes out, and we'll see how it worked out. I think it's going to be terrific. So we're going to fire this as is. Don't worry about these little marks here, you won't see them. This is just, they will be what they say fugitive. So we've got electric blue, iron red, electric blue all over here, and then iron red on the edge. We'll take a look at this piece after it comes out. This was a piece that we did completely in Daria's Floating Blue. And I think when I look down the line here, this tile right here appeals to me. This is Daria's Floating Blue with titanium white on the bottom half. I think that's very striking. So what I'm going to try and do here is I'm going to put titanium white inside the bowl here. But before I do that, I want titanium white. I'm going to try and make titanium white have a nice clean line. So we're going to take this. Grab that brush that we used earlier for the wax. Use the same brush again. Okay, so my intention here is to have the entire outside of this bowl be Daria's Floating Blue. And then on the top half here, this rim, this flange, I'd like half of that to be the original outside color. But I'd like the other half of it to be the titanium white over the floating blue. So what I'm going to do is center this bowl on this turntable. This is a trick you will have a hard time learning. You can probably do this trick through trial and error. You're going to spin this. I'm going to take the wax. I'm going to put a nice thin coat there. We're going to come around a little bit, make sure we don't get any spills on the outside. Because what we want is, we want this wax to prevent the titanium white from going any further past this line. Okay? Okay. And again, you could do this with the hot wax. It'd be a little bit harder. And while we're waiting for that to dry, immediately we're going to come over here and get the soap. And we're going to clean this brush. Because that wax will start to gum up your brush almost immediately if you just leave it sit for anything. All right, as I said, most of these glazes bear no resemblance to the color they're going to actually be. There are a few exceptions. The Daria's double red gives you some kind of an idea of what the color will be. The titanium white is basically white. Okay. So let's look at this right here. Here is our bowl. The floating blue is on the inside and the outside. The wax ring has been put in place. We're going to very carefully grab some of this glaze. Take a look here. You should always stir the glaze. And before you use it, if you have any uncertainty, stick your finger in it. Make sure that it's nice and even and thick. Okay. Here's our titanium white. I'm going to pour it in here. If you make a mistake, as I said before, if you make a mistake in glazing, do not try and correct it while the glaze is wet. Wait until it's dry. We come in here. There's our edge. How nice. Come around. When I pour it out, be careful to hold it clear of the bucket. You don't want to splash. And we come in here, grab it, and we're going to quickly try and pour it. If you look carefully, you can see that the glaze has resisted for the most part. You can see there's a little bit of glaze that is stuck to the surface of the wax here. That's really not a problem. Once the glaze starts to set up on the part where it's supposed to be, if you just take a damp sponge and come in here, you can carefully wipe away that glaze where it's not supposed to be without messing up the area where you've waxed. Okay, so here we are, titanium white on the inside of Darius Floating Blue. And we've been through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 glazes. And we've glazed 3 pieces. That's not bad. Remember, when you're glazing, do not do it in a hurry. And if you feel that you have messed up your glaze, we don't think it's going to work out. Remember, in art, there's no such thing as wasted effort. Everything you do contributes to your knowledge and your skill. So that if you have a piece that you've worked a long time on and the glaze is not, it didn't adhere right, you messed it up, the glaze is not where it's supposed to be, it's cracked, it's chipped, whatever. The best thing you can do for yourself and the piece is to take this piece, take it over to the sink, wash all the glaze off completely. Within 2 days, you'll be able to go back and start over again and glaze it right the second time. That's the best advice I can give you. Thank you very much.